My name is Ted Landsmark. I am director of the Kitty and Michael Dukakis Center for Urban and Regional Policy at Northeastern University, which is part of our School of Public Policy. And tonight you have joined, as you know, the Open Classroom. We've spent this semester discussing and hearing presentations from a really fascinating group of individuals who've talked about how design can have very fundamental positive impacts on changing our environments and on addressing a number of issues that have been highlighted, particularly during COVID. And tonight, we're dealing with one of those issues that has become particularly salient because of COVID, as many more people are finding themselves either homeless or on the brink of being homeless. And it's also my understanding that the more appropriate term now is houseless, as opposed to homeless, because it really speaks to the condition that individuals find themselves in. We've been doing this series in conjunction with the Rudy Bruner Awards for Excellence, which have celebrated great design around the United States. Logistically, just a reminder for those who've not been with us before, if you have questions, please post them in the Q&A box. We will also look at whatever may show up in the chat box, but the preference is to have you post your questions in the Q&A box, and we will get to as many of them as we can. With that, I will turn the screen over to my colleague and great friend, Anne-Marie Lubenow of the Bruner Foundation. Anne-Marie, you're on.
Thank you, Ted. As Ted mentioned, my name is Anne-Marie Lubenow, and I'm the director of the Rudy Bruner Award for Urban Excellence, a program of the Bruner Foundation. For those of you who don't know about the Rudy Bruner Award, it's a national urban design award that recognizes transformative places that contribute to the economic, environmental, and social vitality of American cities. And we're really pleased to be partnering with Ted and Northeastern this semester to offer the Inspiring Design series. As Ted mentioned, this session will focus on the challenge of ending homelessness and addressing people who are houseless. And of course, while the problem is not new, it's becoming more critical every day, particularly as we become increasingly aware of the challenge of housing insecurity. Interestingly, more than half of our 88 Rudy Bruner Award medalists incorporate housing in some form, and most of those address the urgent need for affordable and supportive shelter and services in American cities. For tonight's session, we've assembled a group of panelists who offer insight based on their efforts addressing the issue in New York City, Dallas, and Los Angeles, as well as other cities across America. And they'll also highlight two of our Rudy Bruner Award medalists. The Times Square, which is the 1997 Rudy Bruner Award Gold Medalist, which is the rehabilitation of a historic hotel into supportive housing in New York City, and the Bridge Homeless Assistance Center, the 2011 Rudy Bruner Award Gold Medalist, a campus offering shelter and coordinated services in downtown Dallas, Texas. As with our previous sessions, we're continuing to partner with the Boston Society of Architects and Boston Society of Landscape Architects to offer continuing education credits. Use the appropriate link in the chat box to submit your information. So just briefly, a few introductions for tonight's panelists. Roseanne Haggerty is the president and CEO of Community Solutions. She's an internationally recognized leader in developing innovative strategies to end homelessness and strengthen communities. Roseanne founded Common Ground Community, a pioneer in the development of supportive housing, including the Times Square in New York City. Myriam Camargo is the founding partner of Camargo Architecture. She's a licensed architect and interior designer whose work includes planning and designing buildings for public and private sectors throughout the United States, including the Bridge in Dallas. And tonight she'll share the story of the Bridge and her firm's ongoing work with the organization. And John Friedman is the co-founder and principal of John Friedman Alice Kimm Architects. The Los Angeles-based firm has designed two Rudy Bruner Award medalists, the LA Design Center, a 2007 silver medalist, and La Cret's Innovation Campus, a 2017 silver medalist, which we heard about a couple of sessions ago. John Friedman, Alice Kimm Architects recently launched the Open Source Homelessness Initiative, which we'll hear more about in tonight's session. So just in terms of the format, once again, we'll begin with brief presentations from Roseanne, Myriam, and John. Then we'll pivot to conversation with the three of them before turning to audience Q&A. So just a reminder, please use the Q&A box to submit your questions, and we look forward to the conversation. And with that, I will turn it over to Roseanne.
Well, thank you, Anne Marie, and thank you, Ted. Delighted to be here. And you're bringing back many memories. It was quite some time ago that our Times Square hotel project received the Rudy Bruner Award. And our journey has really been from designing buildings, permanent supportive housing, and other types of purpose-built accommodation for those experiencing homelessness and low-income working people, to designing systems. And so I'll take you on this journey. This is a shot of the Times Square in 1997, still a wonderful building, providing permanent supportive housing, which means affordable housing with a lease for individuals who have experienced homelessness, plus low-income working people from the community, with supportive services embedded on site that are there to support residents in overcoming the problems that had led to their homelessness in the first place. And those take the form of health, mental health, other supports that allow people to really rebuild their lives and move forward. Back in the day, the organization Common Ground is now called Breaking Ground. We built lots of permanent supportive housing. Here's a snapshot of just many of the roughly 3,000 units that we created over the course of the 20 years I led the organization. And enormously effective solutions to homelessness. People would not become homeless again. But to go to the next slide, there was a problem that gradually we started to grapple with, which was though we and other organizations were building more and more supportive housing, homelessness in New York continued to grow and grow. And that really prompted a reckoning, because our original mission was not building housing, it was solving homelessness. And we gradually came to see that there was this disconnect between more units, which we all thought was just the answer to homelessness, and actually wondering, why are people who are living on the streets of our very neighborhoods where these buildings are opening up, the same people who've been there for years and years, like, why aren't the pieces of this whole story coming together? And so we paused and began actually going to speak with individuals living on the street and ask them, like, what kind of housing are you seeking? You know, are you aware that we just opened a building here? And what we found was this a complete disconnect between people's experience who were on the street and seeking help, and the way that the basic bureaucracy of which we were a part was structured, so that, you know, our work on building housing for people experiencing homelessness, we were in touch with shelters and had, you know, overwhelmed with applications, but no one actually had the whole picture of how people were entering into homelessness, exiting homelessness, no prioritization system, no real linkage between the city's housing policy and the responses to homelessness. And one just vivid manifestation of this was when we started bringing organizations working on homelessness, all like incredibly committed, well, you know, motivated people together to say, let's at least try to study this problem we're learning and look together at what it takes with all of the different rules, each of our organizations that are kind of interdependent, what it takes to get a single person out of homelessness. We would come up with basically this picture that it would take, you know, a year, it would take, you know, 40 to 80 steps. And it was almost impossible for the most vulnerable people experiencing homelessness to thread their way through it. In fact, those of us working on different parts of the problem had no idea how the whole system worked. So out of this sobering realization, we actually decided to take a different course. And 10 years ago, created a new organization really around what it would take to learn our way into, with communities wanting to like get past the confusion of our well-intended efforts to seriously reducing and ending homelessness. We created community solutions with that purpose. And if you can go to the next slide, please. And what we found is that this question of how do you count down to zero homelessness It is a thorny one, but what we have learned over the course of these 10 years is that it's completely achievable. We work now in 84 metropolitan areas, including many rural communities at, at the outskirts of counties that have signed on voluntarily to be part of a network that is getting to something we call functional zero, which means homelessness is measurably rare and quickly resolved. And what we've learned from, in particular, are the great victories in global health over the last 2 generations, and how you organize a system to actually solve a problem, just not react to a problem. But I'm going to show a video next and go to the next slide that essentially tells you how this process, which is called Built for Zero, works. And it's a new way of designing a system that is now working in all of these communities, 14 of which have actually ended chronic or veteran homelessness. So we'll start with the video.
Can you imagine living in a community that has solved homelessness? A world where when an emergency arises, a person can get the support they need to remain in housing. And if they ever lose their home, they are moved into housing quickly by a system that knows them and what they need. Homelessness is rare, brief when it happens, and never becomes a way of life. The truth is, we don't have to just imagine it. In the Gulf Coast region of Mississippi, any veteran who becomes homeless is connected to housing within 30 days of identification. No one's left behind. And they aren't the only ones. Across the country, communities in Built for Zero are proving that homelessness is solvable. They do it by shifting their methodology and their mindset. First, they build a single team that is accountable for ending homelessness across the community. Who's responsible for ending homelessness in your community? The truth is, many stakeholders hold a piece of the solution, but no one has their eye on how the pieces fit together. In Built for Zero communities, everyone who serves the population works together to align their collective efforts behind a shared goal. Second, they commit to a shared aim of ending homelessness. Often, success for those working on homelessness is defined by how their individual programs perform. Built for Zero communities measure progress by whether they are collectively driving down the number of people experiencing homelessness. Their goal is to reach functional zero, a dynamic milestone that ensures homelessness stays rare and brief. Are fewer people experiencing homelessness than can be routinely housed? Once they reach functional zero for veterans or people experiencing chronic homelessness, they work to sustain it and scale that learning to the next population until their systems are built to end homelessness for all. Third, they know everyone experiencing homelessness by name and in real time. You can't solve a problem that you can't see. And homelessness is a dynamic problem that is constantly changing. But it's often tracked using an annual anonymous street count, which is just a snapshot. To end homelessness, a community needs a video. Built for Zero communities maintain by name data on who's experiencing homelessness in real time. They understand not only every individual's needs, but the dynamics of the population as a whole. They know who is entering homelessness, who is actively experiencing it, and who is exiting it. That way, they can target where systems can be improved, test new ideas, and track whether their efforts are actually driving numbers down. Finally, they make data-driven targeted investments. Expanding housing resources is crucial, but many cities have dramatically done so without making a dent in homelessness. The reason? They never fixed the housing system. Real-time data enables communities to secure and target housing resources to drive the greatest possible reductions in homelessness. Homelessness is a big and complex problem, but it's not too big or complex to be solved. While it affects those who experience it in the deepest way, it affects less than 1% of the population. Communities can build systems that continually eliminate it and ensure everyone has a place to call home and live with dignity. We can take steps together toward a future where homelessness being rare and brief is the norm, not the exception. Is your community a part of it?
So I'll just maybe leave you with some highlights and some provocations perhaps for our discussion afterwards. Any community can be doing this, marshaling its efforts toward ending, not simply responding to homelessness. And these are the things that we have found over these years, working with so many communities that share this commitment that need to be in place. The shared aim, the single team across the community, that each organization plays a role, but is accountable to a collective result. Knowing people by name, not allowing this problem to be one of anonymity and lack of accountability. Having flexible resources, including housing, that can be adapted quickly to fill gaps, and to be learning from other communities what's working, to be have a menu of strategies that you can apply and adapt to your own community. Next, also, what we've learned is, though building beautiful buildings and adding to the housing supply is very important, we have opportunities in this country right now to be buying existing market rate housing or hotels and converting them into permanent, affordable, and supportive housing for the homeless. We've done that in a number of cities, like in this case in Aurora, Colorado, and next recently purchasing with the city of Santa Fe an extended stay hotel. When I think of the Times Square and the years it took to create that wonderful building, and a fraction of the time we were able to, with these cities, get housing online for people who desperately need it. And so maybe next slide, please. The takeaway I hope that you recall from this presentation is the need to shift from only a focus on individual programs to be thinking about the whole and to be designing systems that are actually built and accountable for ending homelessness, and that it works. And next slide, please. We are so proud of these communities that are at the vanguard of this movement. 84 of them, 51 are driving reductions in homelessness. 14 have already ended homelessness for a population. And this is proving day by day what we all know in our bones. This is a solvable problem, and it's on us to make this happen. Thank you. And let me turn it over to Myriam.
Thank you very much. I am going to try and manage my video over here. 1 second. Okay. So first of all, I think I need to share with you that the Homeless Assistance Center for Dallas, called The Bridge, is one of the most meaningful projects that our firm has participated in. And so thank you so much for inviting me to share the project with you. And I think that for most cities and for solving the problem of homelessness, we all recognize that the housing issue is a huge one. And finding housing, affordable housing, really is one of the answers to ending homelessness. So for the city of Dallas, this homelessness problem had become, a bit of an issue, especially in the downtown area where most of the homeless in Dallas reside. And the city resolved that it wanted to really do something to address the homelessness issue. And incoming Mayor Laura Miller in 2003 appointed a committee to address the homeless, as well as she appointed a homeless czar whose job was to educate everyone about the needs of the homeless. I think most of us recognize also that there's a huge misconception about the homeless. You have the chronic homeless people as well as newly homeless people. Many of them, are there by happenstance, not necessarily because they have chosen to do so, and they just need a little bit of help to be able to get back on their feet. To this end, not only was homelessness becoming an issue within the city, but also because it was hindering a bit of the re-emergence of the downtown area, as well as further development, or at least the business community felt that it was hindering their efforts. So the city came together, and their vision was to empower the homeless individuals and families to sustain and maintain permanent housing. Our team, Keiko Architecture and Overland Partners, were engaged by the city to assist them in developing a program. And through the programming process, we assisted them in forming what the mission had to be in order for their vision to come to fruition. So providing a safe, caring, and respectful and dignified refuge for individuals and families, offer services and facilities that sustain and maintain clients in achieving self-sufficiency and permanent housing, and also, of course, the ability to engage the homeless individuals and make them aware of available resources. Dallas, as you all know, is part of the large North Texas metropolitan Dallas-Fort Worth region. The overall area has a population of about 7.5 million individuals, and Dallas proper really has about 1.34 million individuals, and it is projected that in the Dallas Metroplex area, by 2029, we will have grown to about 1.4 million individuals. So that is really creating a lot of growth. And as I mentioned before, downtown Dallas is really sort of a magnet for the homeless population, mostly because a lot of services happen to be located in the downtown area. Dallas had been grappling with coming up with a homeless center for the previous 12 years to 2003, but somehow they had not been able to figure out what the program needed to be, nor a location for the homeless center. Everyone was resistant to having that be in their own backyard, and therefore it was really difficult to find a place. Ultimately, though, because of the city's resolve, they decided, and even though there were many people against it, to locate in the southern portion of the city, of the downtown, specifically the downtown area. Close by are several other shelters, just Dallas Life and the Stew Pot, who provides a lot of the food or feeding the homeless. And so it seemed like a very good location because not only is it downtown where they are mostly congregating, and therefore they would be able to really find a place to go and seek help, but also because it was a little bit out of the way, somewhat hidden, and that was a way to allow some of the city center to be able to stop some of the loitering and panhandling that was taking place. So this site also offered the ability for the homeless population to find their way into other facilities and resources, such as the medical district, which is to the northwest, Salvation Army, Parkland Hospital, UT Southwest, and then, of course, some of the other shelters located nearby. Adjacent to that is the farmers market. We'll get into that in a moment. But generally speaking, this is pretty much what makes up the downtown area of Dallas, and it's divided into various districts, the Dallas Farmers Market being one of them, the Dallas Civic Center. So the Dallas City Hall is only a few blocks away from where the center is located. The Convention Center and Union Station, the West End, which is a historic district, and then also the Dallas Arts District, which is the largest arts district in the nation. Many believe that the location of the center would impede any kind of growth, but as you can see, many developments came through, and growth has been really amazing, thanks to the way that the center has been handled and the way that really it has been able to provide for the homeless population a lot of the resources that they really need to be able to get back on their feet. So here we are looking at the site, which had tremendous views. It was an empty site. It used to be a former residential little neighborhood. And also it was owned by TXU, Texas Electric, as well as there was an existing warehouse, which was converted into the emergency shelter. But I think the biggest contribution that our team had in terms of the bridge, it was the programming and the way that we approached the project. In talking with the various stakeholders and people who were interested in solving the problem, we were able to discern that there really was not a real program yet in place. No one had really figured out exactly what needed to happen. And so we decided that it would be great for the operator that was going to be operating the center, the city staff, members of the public, building department, and people at the city to also do a little bit of benchmarking. And so we visited several centers in Atlanta as well as in LA. I think LA has probably the highest concentration of homeless. And so it was a great opportunity for us to really understand the operations, how to raise funds, how to run the center, what the decisions that were made in terms of program would affect the architecture and therefore the services that were provided. So through this process, Dallas decided that it needed really to serve both the chronic homeless and the newly homeless individuals, which is really a departure from most centers. Most centers sort of focus on one segment of the continuum of care, but Dallas does both ends of the spectrum and everything in between. As Anne-Marie mentioned at the beginning, this was really a public and private enterprise. Everyone came together, and it seemed like all the stars aligned because we had not only participation from the homeless population itself, but also the mayor's task force, the city's environmental and health services, city staff, as I mentioned before, various service providers, and really it takes a village to solve the problem about homelessness. There are so many needs, as Roseanne mentioned, that it is really mind-boggling sometimes to kind of figure out what exactly is needed. In addition to that, the Central Business District community came to the table, as did members from the community, to be able to provide input as we started the planning and sort of the thinking about the center. We knew that it was going to be very important for us to develop a facility that was not going to intimidate the end users. And so particular attention was paid to the scale of the buildings. It was decided that we would go ahead and approach this as a campus where there will be several buildings that would be very low scale, many of them single story. The largest building being the services building, that would be a 3-story building. And we would enclose a series of courtyards because after all, many of the homeless population find themselves much more comfortable in an open area, open space. And we all understand the need and the benefit of green space and on health and well-being. So here we are. The program offerings really was something that we developed in conjunction with everyone who came to the table. The need to have a triage in the Welcome Center, have the ability to provide the overnight shelter, emergency shelter for those people who are resistant to getting services, also providing a food component, as well as physical and behavioral health, training and education, trying to assist those who needed to get back on their feet and find a new job or find a way to get their resume together in order to be able to get back in the workforce. Also, social services. Many people find themselves in an unfortunate situation where they may have a legal issue, and just solving that little issue might allow them to actually be able to go ahead and acquire housing. Sometimes that really is what is keeping them from being on the street. Also, our work live program, and then the residential program up on the 3rd level. So this all, as Roseanne illustrated, it is a very thoughtful endeavor to be able to figure out the best way to get people from point A to point Z so that they can best be helped. And in terms of the surrounding neighborhood, we understood that it was important for us to make sure that it was a secure campus. So the buildings have been pushed to the edge of the walk to make sure that we have a space or a facility that is very inviting. We don't have a lot of gates. The main entrance is, wide open, very inviting, and there are different levels of entries into the campus itself, just in order to identify the different levels that the population may be receiving services. And so the residents and the people who are making use of the residential programs come in through this particular entrance. And then there's an employee entrance on the back side, which is adjacent to the parking. And the parking space was really thought about in terms of an opportunity for some possibly single room occupancy development to occur, because again, Dallas is also facing the need to provide affordable housing that is something that is in very short supply, and which makes a big difference, especially when the housing first model is what is being adopted. Very much the building seems to be just a beautiful building that is just sitting in the neighborhood. It fits very nicely. It relates very well to the surrounding warehouse facilities. And so we are taking you on a tour of how a homeless person may first come into the center, which is a nice wide open gate that leads them into the courtyard. And then it allows them to kind of get their bearings and understand, and they are met by case managers in order to be able to provide them with whatever resources might be needed. I think that Anne-Marie mentioned we have been involved with the Homeless Center even since its completion in 2008, and we've relocated the entrance just because they needed to have a little bit of growth and also an intake building that was dedicated for intake itself. The pavilion, which was the existing warehouse, was really a terrible looking facility, but through some really thoughtful design, we're able to convert it into a very nice open space that is welcoming and not intimidating at all. It sleeps about 200 to 300 individuals and provides the basic facilities. The Welcome Center really, as I mentioned, is sort of the triage. That's where intake takes place. It also offers a waiting area. It offers a laundry room. People may be able to get a shower, get a change of clothes, use the library to maintain and keep informed. There's a barber shop where people are able to get groomed so that they can go on their interviews. And also there's a postal service or a mail room, which is important because if you are homeless, where do you receive any kind of information? Where do you have the opportunity to get information that you might need in order to get a job or to resume any correspondence with whatever is needed. Service offerings in the service building include training and education. As you can see in this middle slide, it was important that we open it up to the street because we wanted people to be able to see that this population is intent on getting help and getting back on their feet, and they're doing something about it. There's also behavioral health, physical health, as I mentioned earlier, social services, legal aid. And one of the main services or resources is the ability to be able to get a hot meal and to be able to share that with others in terms of community and belonging someplace. I think one of the most beautiful moments that I've experienced at the center has been when someone, a homeless person, sat down at a piano that was sitting in the middle of the dining area and started playing during a lunch service. And it was just absolutely incredible. The community and just the way that that music lifted everyone's spirits. The residential program is something that we really strive to make sure that it is very flexible, and it has really worked out very, very well because the majority of the homeless population turns out to be men. These numbers that you see on the screen were the numbers that we planned for. Actually, the men now make up about 75% of the homeless population or in the residential programs, and 25% is for women. We also are able to provide space for the vulnerable population. This may be individuals that had just gotten out of the hospital and need a little bit of assistance to get well enough to be able to join the rest of the community. All of these living spaces are very well thought out and provide storage. If you think about it, if you're homeless, you only have the belongings that you have with you, and so you're always very conscious of making sure that your belongings are safe. And I think that's something that we're able to achieve. In addition to creating a very beautiful facility, we were able to also take advantage of the city's mandate of 1% of the budget for the project to go to public art. And we incorporated and were able to weave it into the solution for the buildings. And as you can see, the residential program is the one that really benefits the most from it. And Gordon Huther is an artist who at some point was homeless himself. And he created this work of art, which is Windows to the Soul. And these windows really are expressed by writings from actual homeless individuals that were experiencing homelessness in the Dallas area. So a lot of these writings are very inspirational, and they were incorporated into the windows. Not only did we have a requirement for public art, but also the city of Dallas passed a code requirement that one has to meet at the minimum with a public facility or a city-owned facility sustainability at the silver certified level for the USGBC. And we're able to do that by the use of natural daylight, the rainwater harvesting. We also incorporated a gray water system, which turns out was a great idea, but because of the amount of debris that is found in the laundry that is done by the clients themselves, it became overwhelming. So we needed to create a different solution that sort of filtered the water first and then went into the gray water system. Also, the roof that you see, the green roof, was one of the first planted roofs in the North Texas area, which is a green roof, and it has done really, really well. And it just creates a really nice view from the upper levels of the residential and second floor services building. The impact that the bridge has had is pretty tremendous, and it's one of those things that really allows the city to be proud of the fact that they really are caring for the less fortunate. I think in this series, we've talked a great deal about social equity. And I mentioned that 75% of the clients at the center are male. Not only that, but also they are African American, the majority of them. And with COVID, it used to be that there were about 35% of African American clients. It's now at about 65%. So we believe that the bridge is really doing a great job of equalizing or balancing that social inequity in helping people to seek permanent housing. And not only do they provide the services at the bridge, which is what these people really need in order to be able to get back on their feet, but they stay with them even beyond when they're placed in housing, when housing is finally found. I think one of the biggest things, as I mentioned, for Dallas, the challenge is affordable housing. And there are some other endeavors similar to what Roseanne has shared that are taking shape in the city. A lot of empty buildings are being renovated, and some of the hotel rooms are also being prepped in order to be able to house people that really need that housing component. So this building, this campus really is emblematic of the city of Dallas and the care that they've taken and the opportunity that when everything kind of aligned, they were able to create a campus that really assists the homeless population. And I'd like to share a short video, it's about a 2.5 minute, maybe 2 minutes and 15 seconds of the, if I can get there.
Myriam, I'm sorry to interrupt. The resolution hasn't been as good as it could be on this. So I'm going to see if Ben has any suggestions before you go into the video, just to see if he has any suggestions for fine tuning it.
And let me also say that we will get a clean set. I think we have a transmission problem. But we will get a clear set, which we will post as part of the archived edition of this presentation, because we haven't wanted to stop the presentation in order to fix this technical glitch. And then I would just ask of our participants, if you have questions and answers or comments, please post them in the Q&A box, because we've been trying to fix this transmission problem, and there are a number of comments related to the presentation, and those of us who are putting the presentation on need to use the chat box in order to communicate with each other while we're trying to fix it. So we may not necessarily be able to fix this at this moment on the fly, but as we put together the final presentation for archival purposes, we will have a clean set of slides. So Myriam?
Okay, thank you, Ted. Let's see.
Myriam, I'll just say one of our attendees has a good suggestion, which is if you turn off the video on your camera, it might make the resolution of your screen a little bit higher quality.
Okay, I did that. So let me press this. If not, we can just abandon it. And as Ted mentioned, it can be part of the archive. Is that better? Well, let's see if it comes out.
So many reasons play into being homeless. I've had people that had 2 jobs and still couldn't afford affordable housing.
Many individuals come to the bridge perhaps at the most desperate moment in their life. And so our care managers are working with them to identify affordable and/or permanent supportive housing in an environment in the city of Dallas where it is, again, finding this needle in a haystack.
When I first got there, I didn't get a mat right then and there, but I had to keep coming until a mat was available. It was pretty hard, but you have to do what you have to do to actually get where you're going.
The Bridges Housing Program is designed to focus on the individual, unique needs of each of our guests.
It was a stepping stone to get to where I'm at right now.
I think the Bridges' main goal is not only just to make sure that people are off the streets and safe, but to get to the root of some of those issues in order to give them housing.
It helped me with my self-esteem and self-love and being more responsible and more independent.
We want to make sure that a housing-ready guest has all of those essential, minimal resources at their disposal.
They're there to help you to get to the next step that you want to get to.
It's one thing to get a guest into the row housing, but we're also committed to housing follow-up. We're actually involved with a guest another 6 to 9 months as they're transitioning into their own home.
You have to really stay focused on the goals that you set to be there and to move forward.
We are trying to set them up for success when they do leave the bridge. Whenever someone can sustain housing, then that's a win for everybody.
The most important thing I'm looking forward to is having my own key and walking into my own place.
And with that, I would love to turn it over to John.
Thank you. And let me say again, we continue to have some transmission issues. We'll fix those as we prepare the archived edition, but I really want us to focus as much as possible on the substance. Sometimes in Zoom world, there are technical issues, and rather than dwelling on those, let's deal with the substance of tonight's presentations. So John, you're on. But you're only on if you unmute yourself.
Sorry. How are we looking now? Are we pixelated or are we good?
You're good.
Okay, all right. So anyway, well, let's see. I mean, our firm doesn't do, you saw some of you saw the project that Alice showed of this clean tech incubator that was initiated and owned by the city under a kind of a different subject. I'm going to show you three different kinds of projects that are specifically related to the ending of homelessness. They're much smaller and more modest than what you've just seen. And I think the idea is, and I think the point may be that it is a very complex problem, and I've seen this already sort of noted in many of the kind of chats and questions that come across. And ours has been, well, you'll see that our kind of approach and our contribution to that is taking several different forms. So first of all, the first project is this navigation center for the city of Los Angeles in Council District number 8, which is in South Los Angeles, what we formerly called South Central. And of course, you're probably wondering what is a navigation center. Well, it's not housing. It's basically a service center that provides several different things. The biggest thing, the most important thing it's providing is for personal storage. So in some ways, this acknowledges that people will continue to live on the street or until homelessness ends, but people will be on the street until they find housing. There are issues, there are services that those people need, such as the issue of personal storage, which in our case takes the form of, which you'll see in the plan, of bins that allow people to come in, put their tents or sleeping bags or other personal items that they might be worried about that might get stolen if they get a job or if they go to the doctor. There's a system now for people to store their things and not have to worry that begins to help them, get on their way. This center also provides for personal hygiene, showers, and toilets, for laundry, and it provides informal counseling, job training. So even without housing, it's actually beginning to provide just services for that kind of first phase. I mentioned the locations in South LA at the intersection of two major avenues. There's nothing particularly special about this neighborhood. What is special is actually that the council person whose district this is, Marquise Dawson Harris, was very concerned about, his vision. He had a great vision, and he was very concerned. He pushed for a building that would not just kind of disappear among the other buildings or the used car lots. That wouldn't just be another, also just a kind of one-story institutional building, but that it would have a civic scale and uplift the community it serves. And so, this should have gone with that last bit, but in terms of the design objectives, again, a building that will provide a civic image, provide dignity and joy and meaning, which I'll get to in a second. And then this, again, I won't really dwell on the plans of the structure itself, On the left, you can see the big kind of storage warehouse for those bins. Think of it like a safe deposit box, vault, where the bins come in and out. Or on the right-hand side, what I'm really kind of trying to show you is that the building it was built from modular construction. So with modular construction, you can also easily kind of build that in another city, building them in the factory, which makes it faster and not necessarily cheaper at this point, but hopefully that's the goal. This was kind of earlier rendering of the project, and I think kind of one of the main things is to see that there's a queuing area on the left-hand side where people wait, not where the parking is, but on the other side where people wait before they go into the facility. And the kind of idea here was to make a joyful place because it's the less fortunate also deserve to be treated with the same dignity and respect that the rest of us get. And then if you see on the right-hand side, I'll just kind of use the cursor to show, we kind of integrated this gable form, and that's traditionally the form of housing, even with a little chimney. It kind of represents a house. And that made sense to us because there was actually domestic services being provided here. But at the same time, we were kind of turning that kind of form upside down in order to say that, home means different things for different people, especially houses mean different things. And the home can be anything. It can be whatever people decide. And so within the design that we do, we're also trying to communicate a message, even if it's subtle. And we think these good design makes that kind of difference. And so here it is in its final form. You can see some of the exuberance was eliminated, and at the same time it maintains this maintains a presence on the street. I particularly like the way that the canopy reaches out to the public on the sidewalk and invites them in. And again, kind of improving that kind of good design in our civic buildings does have the power to uplift our communities. And that recognizing the facilities like this, recognizing them as community centers without the stigma, has tremendous impact for how we think about people experiencing homelessness. And not only helps them function better, the people and the facilities, but also strengthens the social infrastructure of the entire city for all of its citizens. And here are just some of the final images. And in particular, you'll note the orange and blue mural, which was painted by a local artist. Now, the second project is something we were approached to design by the United Way of Greater Los Angeles. And it's part of its Everyone In campaign, which of course has a double meaning. On one hand, it suggests that everyone should get in off the streets, should be provided some kind of dwelling. On the other hand, it means sort of for everyone to get involved, to get educated on the issue, so that we can solve the problem together, as really any good society should. So it's also important to note that this is the first of the organization's program, which will commission a series of public art installations to raise awareness about homelessness, and that will use art as a tool of activism, which again carries this tacit understanding that design and art have the power to elicit understanding and empathy and ultimately action. Sorry. So what you're seeing here is a number of wind chimes, about 20 of them, which use a tripod design for a couple reasons. First of all, it's more structural, but structurally very efficient, but also it has these kind of anthropomorphic qualities. And they're also portable, so they can be organized in an infinite number of patterns and densities as this insulation is moved around to other parks and public places. They're in different heights, 10, 15, and 20 feet tall. They're all stabilized by a circular ring at the base, which started out as 6 feet, kind of based on our beloved social distancing rules, which we hope to be seeing the end of in the near future. But they had to expand to 7 feet in order, because the structural engineers told us that's how wide they had to be to keep from tipping over. Each of the tripods holds 6 chimes, and each of them are in a different length and color, and those correspond to different notes. And so there's 10 notes used overall in the project. And again, this kind of just indicates that it's the different lengths that provide the different notes. And then we associated or we attached a color to each one of them. During construction, we got a certain amount of money for the project. Was kind of turnkey, and we spent all of it, even though we worked, tirelessly for a couple months. We spent all of it on the construction of these pieces, of these parts, and you can see the rings, the chimes, and then the tripod, and then how it's put together. What you missed in that last shot to the right was the sail, which are these black elements at the top. A circle, which we thought of as a face, kind of a gable form again is a home, a rectangle is a door, and when the wind pushes these, they move the striker, which you can hardly see inside the chimes, and begins to make this music, this random sort of music. But in addition to depending on the wind to activate the chimes, a collection of musical scores have been composed for special events, and they will be played, each tripod having a musician to strike the chimes. So in the end, what we're hoping for is a kind of a merging of sculpture, music, and message, and education, and inspiration to create this powerful experience, hopefully. The tripod standing in for kind of the individuals, but the whole composition suggesting the power and the potential for collective action. Because in the end, I mean, I agree. I mean, with Roseanne, that it's a system that has to take place, and yet I think in the long run, the real issue is or one of the real issues in addition to that is just educating the public. Now, the last one is, and I'll get to that. The last thing that we're doing, our project is a project that JFAK, Alice and I have started, which is not an object or a building, but it's a nonprofit organization called OSHI, or the Open Source Homelessness Initiative, or OSHI, and it came into being through our frustration when the frustration that we felt when we started doing research on homelessness or houselessness for a navigation center project, and found that there just wasn't a lot of good information, or maybe more to the point, it was hard to find. And so the purpose of this platform, this website, which was kind of and then the fact that it's open source, I was really inspired by the effectiveness of other open source programs. I mean, and more recently, just sort of the sharing of information in real time concerning the virus, the COVID virus, and how that enabled this vaccine to be developed as quickly in this cooperative manner by 4 companies that, yeah, they were looking for profit in the long run, but we're really looking to help solve this, problem, which was, a threatening problem. And so, and so the purpose is to provide a kind of a central place where a multitude of information can be downloaded and accessed. What works, what doesn't work, case studies of successful projects, maybe those that aren't successful and why they're not, also artwork and other media narratives that address, educate, even provoke, and how the communities of people, and also just, information from the population of the homeless, how they experience homelessness, how they deal with it, what they really need. And again, I think this gets to, this does get to the disconnect and the issues that Roseanne brought in terms of there was the housing, there was the disconnect between what people were providing and what they actually really needed or wanted. So So this thing again will be, I'm sorry, I forgot. Yes, these are the data that we're going to provide all this information and data. We're going to involve architects and policymakers and artists and everybody who has a stake in this issue. And we're going to really show anything to do with homelessness. That's going to be intelligently categorized, legible, easy to navigate, and most importantly, I think in one place, so that anyone who wants to make a difference can find the information and support that they need to have. So finally, really, it's that'll be a place where news is presented and dialogue and collaboration occur, because that's really when the innovation happens. So just last thing I wanted to say is a lot of this gets back to ideas about creating empathy and recasting the image of those experiencing homelessness. Because one of the most profound but sad, if you think about it, reasons that homelessness continues to be such a scourge is that the homeless have been demonized and dehumanized, made to seem responsible for their condition, which is, of course, often partly true. But the fact of the matter is that for the most part, it's a systemic problem that's built into the structure of our social, cultural, and economic system. So OSHI, is the promise of OSHI will be a platform for information, design, art, and narratives that in one way or another touch upon homelessness and help the non-homeless see the humanity and the dignity and the aspirations of the less fortunate. And that's it.
Thanks, John. We have a large number of very good questions coming in tonight. I will start by just noting that we could spend an entire semester in a very focused course looking at all of the possible and realized solutions to the issues here. Yes, it is true that abandoned buildings in some places have been used for housing houseless people. And it is true that in some places, including Boston, the private sector has been involved in building some affordable housing and housing for the homeless. And in fact, Boston at this moment, as hard as it may be for some folks to believe, is in the lead nationally in building units. Only a few weeks ago, we converted a former YWCA into a building for homeless people. But apart from that, there is a recurrent question that keeps coming up, and that is, how have all of you seen different government agencies and private sector groups and community-based groups come together around a shared understanding of the comprehensive nature of the issue in a way that doesn't simply produce a single building, but really provides the kind of comprehensive solutions that Roseanne talked about at the beginning of this? How do you get all of these people to come together and to work together on this kind of issue?
Do you want me to jump in a bit on that one, Ted?
Sure.
I will say that there is no magic to it. It is hard work, but really the model that we can all really draw on now is, what's it taking across every community to fight COVID? This is like a really clear aim that everyone shares. That we are looking at the pattern of and what's happening to a dynamic problem in real time and adjusting what we're doing to account for what is going to be required to stay ahead of the problem. It is not a responsibility of one person. I'd say that communities that are making progress on homelessness look a lot like communities that are making progress on COVID. The mayor, the county executive is saying, like, I've got this ball. This is what we're going to do. I'm asking each of you to play your part in this way. We are monitoring what's happening in real time. If we have a plan on Monday that data shows isn't working by Thursday, we're changing it up. We're not going to say, well, this is what we agreed to. You know, you're basically led by the urgency of the result. And that's what's required in homelessness. And minimally, whether it's a city or a county, we see it's necessary for the organization called the Continuum of Care. That is the group that receives and accounts for and distributes HUD funding in any geography for the homeless. They've got to be at the table. The mayor, county executive, the VA, because they have the resources for homeless veterans, and the housing authority or authorities. If you've got that group, you know, the coalition of not-for-profits, the political leadership, you know, these two other important entities, all agreeing that they're solving the same problem, measuring it in the same way, holding each other accountable for progress, and not in a blaming environment, but in a learning environment. Like, what do we need to do to solve this? That's the transformation. And it's just hard work and staying at the table.
Still on my screen.
John, was that a comment?
No, I'm told I need to stop sharing on my screen, so I'm trying to.
Oh, okay.
It's done. It is done. I'm sorry. Okay. So,
what are the metrics that you use for success? Again, getting back to Roseanne, in your presentation, you said that there are communities that have essentially eliminated homelessness. How do you set guideposts, and how do you set metrics?
The definition for ending chronic homelessness is one that is being used in Built for Zero communities, is one that HUD also established. And it basically means zero or like some de minimis fraction of the overall population, that to account for the fact in large cities, there's usually a bit of kind of a lag between, you know, when data is entered. But basically for chronic homelessness, which means a person has been experiencing homelessness for a year or more and has a disabling condition, this is the most lethal part of homelessness. People experiencing chronic homelessness, studies show on average, it takes 17 years off their lives. But so this is a group that has been suffering a very long time, and getting those individuals into a stable accommodation with needed support really should be the priority everywhere. And so zero is like a hard zero. With veterans experiencing homelessness, a veteran could become homeless tomorrow. You don't necessarily see that coming in the way that, you know, there's no surprise. Someone who's been homeless for a year or more, you know that person, or you should. But for the definition of ending veteran homelessness, the one that we have really evolved with our communities, is that your system needs to demonstrably and show that, you know, at least 6 months running, and be continually returning to that standard, be able to house more veterans who are experiencing homelessness in an average month than become homeless. So basically it's a sort of a stock and flow measure. Like if on average a community has seen 8 new veterans emerge in a housing crisis, your system has to every month have the capacity to house at least 8 veterans who are newly homeless. And so it's that equilibrium measure.
I don't have a statement as much as a question, and maybe Roseanne can answer this in a sense, because and it's kind of a sensitive issue. But so in order for those leaders of communities, whether they be cities or states or something larger, I mean, of course, we had to have the governors had to do a good job with COVID and the vaccines, and some of that was criticized. And now some of, like in LA, Mayor Garcetti is saying, you know, you should send the vaccines to the city, not to the state. But what I'm trying to get at is, when you say you get all the kind of political bodies, you know, running in the same direction, talking to each other, collaborating, working, that requires those politicians in the first place, organizations, to be on the same page, to want to end homelessness, to see it as something that we have to do. And so I hate to say this, is like, not trying to say it's a red state, blue state, but do you see, so how do we get the rest of the cultures within the United States, our separate cultures, to get on that page? Like, what kind of education, what kind of systems can we get to get some of the states and cities that don't think it's a responsibility on that page? Is that, how do we, I heard there was a story on NPR that was saying, okay, that's kind of, there's all this data that shows the recidivism of youth that are put in jail early for drugs and stuff, and then they just keep going back. And there was this data that showed that if you work with them and in all the ways that you're talking about, the recidivism doesn't go. And if you don't throw them in jail for that first terrible offense, it doesn't happen that way. And so they were saying, oh, the governor in South Dakota, who was Republican and able to convince his other Republicans, let's try this, and then it worked. Whereas next door in Wyoming, not interested, so they just, the same problem perpetuates. So from a political, if we go say, okay, it's not about providing housing because we're getting more homeless than we can actually provide more units. So let's look at it broader, let's look at it as the system. But then even within the system, you need kind of a general agreement within that culture to, how do you see that?
Well, this may be surprising, but I see it as endlessly hopeful. This should not be a partisan issue. Like wherever you are in the political spectrum, you may have different reasons for thinking that there shouldn't be homelessness, that it's bad for business, or that it's a human rights catastrophe. There is a lot of common ground here you see around the country. Many of the communities that are making the most progress are communities that are in red states. And we have pretty equally, a distribution. In some ways, perhaps it's a culture of a particular community around how they come together to deal with collective threats. For instance, one of the really extraordinary communities in Built for Zero is Gulf Coast, Mississippi. Like it's a 6-county area along the Gulf Coast. This is a community that was really slammed by hurricanes Katrina and Rita. And so many people experienced homelessness that they have been true leaders in mobilizing their county government, their not-for-profits, their faith community, veterans organizations, small businesses to like, hey, we know what it feels like. We see the path. We've all got to work together. So it's very hard to draw inferences about like larger political patterns. I mean, in Los Angeles, I remember at the outset of COVID having conversations with many leaders there and just asking, let's start with what are examples of where the city and the county have collaborated effectively. And it was sort of sad. It was like, well, on the fires and on the Rose Bowl parade, it's just like not a great record of really wrestling with things that are. And so I think but there are, even in places that are really complex, like LA, there are models of where did our communities actually join forces, across city, county lines to get a critical job done. And I think it's always good to draw on what has worked, what is working, and build from there.
Have you found that that approach works? That approach of building collaborative activity works in those places where there's been pushback, where there's NIMBYism, where there's a sense that homeless people are not like us. There's someone else, and that's not going to happen to us. How do you mobilize people in those communities that have tried to distance themselves from all the issues of homelessness, and how easy it is to become homeless in America?
It's a really important question, Ted, but what's interesting is like when you get everybody organized around like the goal of eliminating homelessness, no one thinks it's a good idea that homelessness exists. There is a wide range of views about like, why it exists and what like my organization or my neighborhood's responsibility in this whole story is. However, we see very little resistance to the idea of joining forces to end homelessness. That does not mean that individual, it tends to be housing, developments don't create flashpoints for like, well, is this good for my neighborhood? Is this the right place? But that's a separate question than the idea of a system that works, that helps a community actually perform a really fundamental task of seeing that all of its residents have a safe place to live.
We have related questions around providing these kinds of comprehensive services. One question comes in from San Francisco, where it's pointed out that many of the homeless people are opioid addicted. How do you deal with that? And then to both John and Myriam, in the centers that you've created to bring people together, how did those centers come into being as places of both storage and assessment, and then the delivery of not just housing, but a range of services?
Yeah. Well, Ted, I'll say on the first question, it's an important issue. Issues of substance abuse, physical health, other behavioral health questions. They they make resolving a housing crisis that much more complex. But these are problems that are getting solved all the time. And let's face it, an addiction issue is not going to get better on the street. This is where the movement toward housing first. Get people into a safe, stable place. Like the odds of their, addiction issues, mental health issues improving have just shot up about 1 million-fold. And so, I think you can get discouraged thinking, oh, this is so complex because these other problems are involved. Starting with housing is always the best bet.
Well, and I also think that providing resources, the necessary resources, is the biggest element that can be offered. Not in a punitive manner. It needs to be something that is allowed, individuals are allowed to maintain their dignity and that they're treated with respect. If they feel like they're being respected and their dignity is intact, they will seek services. They will become much more open to the idea of receiving those services. And I think ultimately to one of your questions, how does that happen? And I think it has something to do with leadership and the resolve to be able to do it. Someone mentioned not in my backyard, NIMBYism. That was the case here in Dallas. For 12 years, they looked for a place and everybody was saying, no, not in my backyard. And finally, the city said, we're doing this. And when the bridge was going to be implemented, there were a lot of people that were greatly opposed, nice, big developers that did not want the bridge to happen there. Even though this land had been vacant for a number of years, all of a sudden there was an understanding that maybe this was a very nice piece of land because it was downtown, it was accessible, and they didn't really want it in their backyard, but the city, the health service providers, just all the stakeholders that I mentioned earlier that came together, philanthropists, also businesses, that were on board decided that this was going to happen no matter what. And so there was that will to make it happen regardless of how much opposition. And at the end of the day, the center has been welcomed because they've been good neighbors. They, pretty much run the center in a very respectable and dignified manner. They keep up the facility. And that has a lot to do with showing the respect and the empathy that is needed for the homeless population. I think education is a huge thing. That was something that we were able to gain through this process. You have this preconceived ideas that homeless people, they're lazy, they don't want to do anything about their situation, and that is totally wrong. Many of them really just don't have the resources that are required for them to be able to get back on their feet. And I think that for most everyone that worked on the project, there was a great understanding, as you said, Ted, that could be me tomorrow. A turn of events, something may happen that is catastrophic. I may find myself homeless, and it could be any of us, really. And that's kind of a sobering thought.
So let me close by asking all of you one question. We have a new administration in Washington, and the expectation is that this administration is much more deeply committed to improving human and social services than we've seen. And we know that there's money that's going to be spent on infrastructure, including social services and human infrastructure. So what would you ask be prioritized as this new administration moves forward in Washington in terms of addressing the issues that you've been raising?
Well, I'll jump in and say accountability for results. Simply spending money doesn't guarantee that the job is getting done. And so making sure that, you know, our collective desire to see that homelessness is ended is actually where we end up, as opposed to we've spent a lot of money and we haven't solved the problem because we weren't disciplined about seeing that we spent it in ways that reached those who are most vulnerable and least connected to the support they needed. So through the lens of accountability for results, I'd say let's make sure that that's part of what's guiding investments.
I would hope that somehow, I mean, the federal government has limited powers, but I would hope that they would use their kind of bully pulpit and the powers that they do have to break the red tape, because in LA, we voted hundreds of $millions for facilities for the homeless, and yet they've been very, very, very slow to come online. And the NIMBYism is just still a real problem. I mean, it's the biggest problem in LA. I mean, as a group, we vote to spend the money. As pieces of the group, we say, spend it somewhere else. And so this has just been a tremendous problem here.
I would say probably a means to be able to provide affordable housing that also has supportive services, because I think that that's the thing. A lot of people who are able to transition into housing, if they don't have the right resources and the right help, cannot maintain that housing. But then again, finding the housing that is affordable in the first place is the biggest obstacle.
I note that you didn't recommend changes in the tax code or in the creation of new financial incentives for building these kinds of not just housing, but systems of support for people who may become homeless. Why not changes in the financing systems that could make all of this more possible?
That could well be needed, Ted, but if you start with accountability for results, that just forces you to like, what do we need to do to get the results we want? Maybe it's changes in financing, maybe it's changes in zoning, maybe it's changes in mental health policy, maybe it's changes in how we allocate vouchers and how we incent not-for-profits to collaborate. But start with the aim, the result, and it will drive the kind of reckoning with like what else needs to change in order for us to have the result we want as a community, as a nation.
That's cool. I'll note again that we had some technical difficulties in broadcasting some of our images earlier in this program. And as we go back and do some editing, we will get clear images so that when this program is finally posted, you'll be able to see clear images. I want to thank our presenters tonight. It's a very provocative set of questions that we're trying to deal with, and some very creative solutions that you're putting forward. And there's a lot more work to be done in this field, obviously, using all the creative resources that we have. So let me turn this back over to Anne Marie.
Thank you, Ted, and thank you, Roseanne, Myriam, and John, for a truly inspiring presentation, or presentations that, as Ted mentioned, was very provocative, and certainly I think has provided a lot of food for thought for the future. As Ted mentioned, the recording for this session will be accessible both on the Myra Kraft website and our Rudy Bruner Award website. The latter will include information and resources, including those that you heard about tonight and the case studies for the Times Square and the bridge. As I mentioned at the onset, we have a number of Rudy Bruner Award winners that address housing, especially supportive housing for the homeless, and services. You just saw 2 tonight, so I encourage you to explore our website and learn more. Next week, we will discuss, actually, it will be an interesting continuation of what we talked about tonight. We'll be discussing the importance of fostering public dialogue about not only design, but urban planning and development issues in cities. And we'll be joined by Boston Globe columnist Renee Loth, who will moderate a conversation with Philadelphia Inquirer architectural critic Inga Safran and Houston Chronicle op-ed editor Raj Mankad about their work writing about urban development, including Buffalo Bayou Park in Houston, one of our Rudy Bruner Award medalists. So thank you again for joining us tonight. Thank you to our panelists, and we look forward to seeing everybody next week.